We're processing the process. We feel like this is a really important election. There's a lot of first-time voters in the audience today, I'm sure. And for whatever reason, our generation's really good about sharing Facebook articles about candidates, but not so good at turning out for the polls. And we think a lot of that might come from confusion and lack of understanding about the process. So we've done a lot of research, and we're here to fill in as many blanks as we can. And I highly encourage you, we're going to try to leave some time at the end for questions. If you have any questions during any of our speeches, just go ahead and write them down so we can really address those and get those questions answered, because it's a very important topic. So without further ado, I'll introduce ourselves.
Chris, I'm going to be speaking about the background information on Democrat and Republican parties and what they believe in.
I'm Johnny. I will be giving you a breakdown on the platforms of the top presidential candidates from the respective parties.
I'm Josh. I'm going to be talking to you guys about the primary process, how a Democratic candidate or a Republican candidate gets the nomination to run for their party.
I'm Chandler. I'll talk about the Electoral College and what role that plays in every election.
Alright, so to get started, as most of you may know, voting has become quite a hostile activity nowadays, especially with how passionate everyone is about their personal beliefs and views. So sometimes these views can be directly related to their party affiliation. So let's get into those affiliations. So with that being said, how many of you knew that the Republican Party was actually the Democratic Party back in the day, and then vice versa? Right, so I didn't know that. So being as the newest voters with the least amount of knowledge in politics and whatnot, I believe it's pretty important to get informed on where these parties originated and what they believe in. So there are a ton of political parties and stuff like that, but today we're going to focus specifically on Republicans and Democrats, like I said earlier. Right, so let's get into the origin of both of the parties. So the current Democratic Party can be traced actually all the way back to Thomas Jefferson. And according to Eleanor Fiore, who wrote an article on the background information on both the Democrat and Republican parties. And then likewise, according to Fiore, the Republican Party can actually be traced all the way back to during the Civil War and during the election of Abraham Lincoln, right? So, and then another little background information on the two parties is that the Democrats are represented by a donkey, and then the Republicans are represented by an elephant. And the donkey was chosen because of Andrew Jackson, who was publicly known as being a jackass, because of how adamant he was about letting the people rule from his opposers. And then the Republican elephant was just derived from a cartoon from the Harper's Weekly Report or whatever. So now we'll get into the current Democratic Party beliefs and views. So Democrats are also known as liberals, and they focus on a broader range of social services in America, according to Mark Edel, who's a well-known historian. And the Democrats tend to believe in favor of active role in the government, which can lead to improved lives and that kind of stuff, and also lead to create equal opportunities and overall equality for all. And opposite of that would be the Republicans, and they're also known as the conservatives, which their philosophy is based on limited government and a powerful foreign policy. And they push for small business, which increases economic activity, and then they push for against big businesses, according to Leon Felkins, who's a political philosopher. So, like I said earlier, the main goal of the conservatives is to have limited government, and they believe that the reliance on government can lead to a decrease in economic productivity and then self-reliance, and then having limited government could help with individual rights, freedoms, and responsibilities for Americans. So as you can see, the Republicans and Democrats clearly stand for different things, and as Mark Edel says, we're living in a world divided by two completely different thinkers, and with Democrats being in full favor of government and Republicans being in full favor of limited government, you can see why like the parties conflict and stuff like that. So before I pass it off to Johnny, just like keep those things in mind and see which side you guys are on.
So now that y'all know the ins and outs of the two major political parties, I'm gonna go ahead and break down the top presidential candidates from both those parties. The top three candidates from the Republican side are Donald Trump, Ted Cruz, and then John Kasich. And then from the Democratic Party, it is Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. So starting off with Trump, Trump wants to completely repeal the Affordable Care Act, which was put in place by Obama. It makes Medicare and getting Medicare expensive, all this stuff. He wants to completely get rid of that. He wants to offer tax relief to middle-class Americans, leaving them with more after-tax income. His immigration reform is pretty radical. He wants to completely build an entire wall across the southern border with Mexico to try to stop illegal aliens from entering the border. He also wants to end birthright citizenship of illegal immigrants. So if there's an illegal immigrant in the nation and they have a child in the nation, then that child is automatically a citizen, and he wants to get rid of that because he believes that that's not right. So Trump's major competitor is Ted Cruz from the Republican Party. He's very conservative. He is a leading defender of the Second Amendment rights. He's constantly fighting Congress on their limitations of our Second Amendment right. He also wants to secure the border and prevent illegal immigrants from entering the nation. He also fights for religious liberty. So he basically wants every American to be able to choose which religious beliefs they believe in and not have any consequences or anything like that. So the third presidential candidate from the Republican side is John Kasich. His main thing is national security. He wants to completely fight global terrorism around the world, and starting with ISIS, he wants to completely get rid of ISIS. He is also a strong proponent of the Second Amendment, which gives us rights to bear arms, and the current Congress is trying to limit our rights on that. He's very pro-life and encourages adoption, and he's also fighting the taxpayer funding of Planned Parenthood, so he wants to get rid of that. So now that we've talked about the Republicans and you guys know their platforms and all that stuff, let's move on to the Democrats. The Democrats' major leading presidential candidate is Hillary Clinton. She's a very, very big environmentalist who plans to install 500 million solar panels around the world or around the U.S. by the end of her first term. She wants to completely switch from oil and gas-related power to solar and wind, and kind of just really more renewable than oil and all that stuff. She also wants to make the lives of college kids easier and more affordable by making community college tuition free. That differs a little bit from Bernie Sanders, who wants to I'll get to him next, but he wants to completely get rid of college tuition. Clinton also wants to strengthen the gun laws. She's constantly trying to limit our Second Amendment rights and wants to fix the loopholes that make this system dangerous. So let's move on to Sanders, now that we've talked about Clinton, who is Clinton's biggest rival from the Democratic Party. He is pretty much a socialist, and he wants college tuition free. He wants to fix the income gap by heavily taxing the rich and giving tax breaks to the not as wealthy. And he's a huge proponent of getting big money out of politics. He thinks that it funds politics too much and it dictates everything, so he wants to completely get rid of that. So in conclusion, this is a very important election because of the change that our society has been going through. Obviously, the candidates from both parties have very differing views. Again, the top candidates from the Republican Party are Trump, Ted Cruz, and John Kasich, and then from the Democratic Party is Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. So now I'm going to pass it off to Josh.
All right, so who voted last Tuesday? Got like 1, 2. Come on, guys. This is exactly what we were just talking about. I guarantee everyone in this room has shared a Facebook article or had a political conversation with their friends in the last week.
I forgot to show you pictures. I really want to show them because they're kind of funny.
They are pretty funny. I'll look at them.
I forgot, so just gonna go ahead and backtrack. So yeah, it's my favorite one, Trump. Not really sure what he's saying, but he's really getting into it. This is Ted Cruz, just if you didn't know who he is. And then this is Hillary Clinton. So yeah, sorry for that.
All right. So, according to VoteSmart.org, in the late 20th century, the average citizens like us felt like they didn't have enough say in choosing presidential candidates. The parties were pretty much just deciding who was best, who fit the platform best, and they just put them up there. So Reformation started, and that's what's led to our current primary and caucus system. How many people in here know the difference between a primary and a caucus? 3. All right. So, we already know that we didn't have a lot of voter turnout in this room. Who truly feels like they understand the primary process and how to get your party's candidate towards the nomination? Good, because I'm going to help you with that. Hopefully by the end of this, you'll feel like you have a much better understanding, and that will help you in voting in the future. So, the delegates are awarded in the primary process, and that's how someone earns a nomination by their party. The way that you earn delegates is by winning in primaries and caucuses, and you can also get delegates at the national conventions. We're going to hit all of that. So, according to a Council on Foreign Relations article by Gopal Ratnam, delegates are party activists, local politicians, and then just high-ups in the political community that have enough sway that can represent a portion of voters. So there's 2 types of, the way that primaries and caucuses works, there's 2 ways that delegates are awarded, either on a proportional basis or on a winner-take-all basis. For example, in Florida, we have a closed primary that's a winner-take-all. That means whoever gets the majority of the vote gets all of the delegates that Florida has to offer. Other states offer them on a proportional basis. So that means if Trump wins with 40%, he gets 40% of delegates. Cruz has 20, he gets 20% of delegates. So that's how a lot like Kasich and Rubio were trailing, but they were still consistently gaining delegates state by state as long as they were not a winner-take-all state. Super delegates, I know we had some questions about that whenever we did our polls, are party leaders who are independent. The delegates that these super delegates possess are independent from what is won in their state. They get to choose who they give their delegates to and basically win. They're not required on our primary to give their delegates out on that date. So super delegates, there's a lot of deals made, a lot of politics and handshakes that take the winning of those people over. And Hillary Clinton's like stomping right now when it comes to super delegates. So according to the Bloomberg Political Tracker, Democrats need 2,383 out of 4,763 delegates to earn their party's nomination. Now that's half plus 1. According to a Real Clear Politics tracker, Republicans need 1,237 out of the 2,472 delegates. Now as it stands, Hillary Clinton has 1,630 to Bernie Sanders' 870. Now a large portion of hers are super delegates. Right now, Trump has 680 delegates, Cruz has 424, and Kasich has 143. So you can see how that works. When it comes to a convention, right now the Republicans are hoping to keep Trump away until the convention comes. That way, there will be a contested convention, and that's where pretty much a competition is held at the convention to nominate someone else. If Trump wins the first vote, then he can keep the nomination. If he doesn't win that, then pretty much all the delegates go loose again, and they can decide then who to elect. So at the Republican National Convention, Mitt Romney, Paul Ryan, somebody that's not even running right now, can come away as the Republican as their nominee. And that's all according to a CNN article by Greg Krieg. So I know that's a lot of information, and hopefully we can cover that some more in the questions, and I can answer anything you want to know. So I'm going to pass it off to Chandler here.
All right, so Josh talked about the primaries and the caucuses, and the next thing in the election process is the actual election. And of course that's going to be coming this fall, And I know that all, or at least most of you guys are going to be out there voting. And the thing though, I think most of you don't realize who exactly you're voting for. Because that's where the Electoral College comes into play. When you vote, or when you cast your ballot, you don't actually vote for the president or the presidential candidate. You actually vote for a slate of electors from each state that cast their vote for the president. And this reflects the representative democracy, which is the form of government currently in the U.S. And this is, of course, the alternative to direct democracy, in which the people directly vote on policy. And of course, you guys are probably wondering, why do we need this electoral college if we can just have everyone vote directly for their president? But John, you, or the one before that. Yeah. Okay. So before I discuss, the importance and necessity of the electoral college, I'll go over how it's composed. So this kind of gives you a really good visual of how it is composed. We have 100 senators total, and so that means that counts for 100 electoral votes. And we have 435 members of the House, so that's 435 more votes. And we also have 3 votes from Washington, D.C. And according to the U.S. Constitution, the number of electors is decided by the representation in Congress, as you see there. And the way that these electors are chosen is, according to the NARA, is by the political parties. So that's how you know that your elector from each state will vote for the candidate who wins the popular vote in each state. And of course, to win, you need a majority of 270 electoral votes. And just as an example, Florida has 29 electoral votes, 2 of those being from the 2 senators, and then 27 of those being from the members of the House. All right, so let's go over why we need the Electoral College. John, you actually, the one before that. Okay, so each block here represents 1 electoral vote, and you can kind of see here how it definitely kind of splits the U.S. evenly. There's no one section that's overrepresented. It's kind of 4 corners, which is kind of nice. And the reason we have the Electoral College is the densely populated areas would dominate the polls, and politicals, they would dominate the polls over the sparsely populated regions, which would be, which would allow for sectionalism, which, if you recall, started the Civil War. So it's really a good thing that this stays away from, or stays off, sectionalism. And then another thing that the framers of the Constitution had in mind when they started the Electoral College was the population of uneducated voters, which back then was free blacks, the poor farmers, and also poor immigrants. And you couldn't always count on these voters to vote correctly. So the Electoral College kind of guaranteed that these electors would vote correctly for their candidate. And then you're probably wondering that the elector does not vote, or that the elector does not always vote for who they originally say they're going to vote for, but this would categorize them as a faithless elector, which is typically frowned upon because they're going against their word, and that really hasn't happened for decades, so it's not really a problem right now. And then, John, can you go to the next one? So this is the 2000 presidential election, which showed how the Electoral College presided over popular vote. And this is really a unique situation because, as you see here, Al Gore, he won a popular vote by 500,000 votes. And then George Bush comes up with 271 votes from the Electoral College. So this kind of demonstrates how ultimately the Electoral College presides over the popular vote. Now we'll hand it off to Chris to wrap it up.
Alright, so today, we spoke about the Democratic and Republican parties, and we saw that the Republican Party was in belief pretty much to support the working man, and the Democratic Party was pretty much in support of equality for all.
And then kind of brief overview, again, the platforms. The top candidates from the Republican side are Donald Trump, Ted Cruz, and John Kasich, and then from the Democratic side, Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders.
And to wrap things up and, to review the primary process, there's 3 ways that candidates earn delegates to get their nomination: primaries, caucuses, and at the national conventions for each party.
And finally, the Electoral College was designed to represent the U.S. population equally, so that all minorities, all ethnicities have a equal say in their in the nomination.
And we really just wanted to kind of leave extra time at the tail end of our symposium here to really answer some questions, because we all 4 of us have done a lot of research, and the main goal of this is to clear up any confusions or any, really anything. So if anyone has any questions, now is the perfect time for it.
When you're talking, you said there's 3 votes from Washington D.C. How are those decided?
Those are also decided from the political parties.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you guys know, what are the most, crucial, battleground states, in the presidential election?
Yeah, as far as that goes, Florida and Ohio are both very telling states. One thing is because Florida is a winner-take-all state, and we may actually be we have 99 delegates, and that might be the highest. It's the highest that's been so far in this election of number of delegates for a winner-take-all state. And then another important thing is the Iowa caucus is huge in telling who's going to be the top candidates and who could potentially win the entire election. So, anything else? We gotta have some questions out there.
How do super delegates come about?
It's just, as time's progressed, it's been very important for the parties to protect their messages and protect what the parties stand for. Like right now, you can the Republican Party doesn't really support Donald Trump, and they're really scrambling for a way to stop him from gaining their nomination. So super delegates are a way for party insiders to kind of steer the Republican or the Democratic parties in the direction that they believe that the party should continue to go in. And so it's like insiders, and the thing is, at the national conventions is where the super delegates really have a lot of sway, because they're kind of some of the last free agents that still have delegates to award. So for example, say if Trump only needs they go to the convention and Trump only needs 100 more delegates to get the nomination to reach his amount. If in that first round he can convince somebody like a super delegate or a couple super delegates, or even just the leftover delegates from states, to give them that 100, he gets it before the contest can actually take place at the convention. And if he fails to get that, then all the delegates are just pretty much released, or half of them are released, and it just starts a feeding frenzy of all the candidates there trying to get as many delegates as they can. Well, we gotta have at least one more question.
So I heard the Republican Party might be dissolved, or something serious is going to happen to it after this election, because obviously people are voting for Trump, but they're not supporting him at all. So did you do any research on that at all?
All right, so it's kind of interesting, because it's kind of the opposite in the Democratic Party right now.
Yeah.
Sanders has the support of the common people, and Hillary has the super delegates and the backing of the party. And Trump has the support of the people, but he doesn't have the support of his party. But he has so much money that he's able to self-fund his campaign, and he does, even though he says he doesn't do that. So basically, he's able to keep himself going without relying on the party.
Yeah.
So
It's kind of impressive.
I mean, it's just the financial backing, because that's really what the parties do is provide financial backing and set up super PACs and set up, these funds that keep the politicians going. So, did I answer your question, or
Yeah, I was just wondering if you thought the Republican Party is gonna change itself after this, because
It needs to. Rubio was kind of the face of the modern Republican Party.
yeah,
And now he's kind of sworn off politics after this election. He said he's going to serve out his Senate term and then just be done. And I just saw an article before this last that he denied a vice president spot with Cruz. So, anything else? Why didn't y'all vote? Well, if there's no more questions, then we were processing the process. Hope you learned something.